world of cable news screaming and social media echo chambers, it's easy to lose the signal in the noise. Every day, policy is debated, votes are cast, and your tax dollars are spent. We cut through the headlines to bring you the critical context you need, focusing on what's really going on in news and politics. Welcome to the Analytical Iowan Podcast. This is your daily dose of fact-driven politics. Let's analyze today's news. Here's Eric.
And we are back here on the Analytical Iowan Podcast. It is Wednesday, December 31st. As you are listening to this, it's New Year's Eve. And I hope everybody who is out celebrating tonight does so in a safe way. And if it is already crossed over to New Year's, wherever you are listening to this, I hope you have a very happy New Year and that you had a safe New Year's Eve celebration if you were so celebrating, or if you're one of those unlucky people who had to work and couldn't go out and celebrate. Well, I hope you enjoyed whatever you were able to do before, after work, whenever you did whatever you were able to do. Now, this is going to be the last Analytical Iowan podcast for this year, obviously, but I will be back tomorrow with a New Year's Day podcast because, as I say every day, there's always a lot to talk about with this administration. Now, I want to start with a story I talked about yesterday. And this is a reminder, and I'm probably going to cover it in tomorrow's podcast as well, here in Iowa and in other states as well. But Iowa is going to be the most restrictive, and it's the one I know the most about. New food stamp laws take effect. And this administration approved a request from Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds and her administration here to grant a waiver. Now, she had been trying under the Biden administration to get this same waiver, and they were constantly denied. But this waiver involves the food stamp program. And starting tomorrow, they are changing what is food stamp eligible here in the state of Iowa. And some of the things that are no longer going to be allowed. And I can understand the argument for certain things, but not everything on the list. Now, it's one of the things that used to be if you could eat it and it wasn't considered hot, ready to eat. It was covered under food stamps. So things that would not have been covered would have been, if you're familiar with the grocery chain Hy-Vee, they're one of the bigger chains here in Iowa. They have a hot food case. Some Walmarts have a hot food case, things like that, where you can go in and you can order like chicken or meatloaf and mashed potatoes or something like that. You know what I mean? A hot meal. Those were never allowed. But if they had a cold case where you could get like leftover meals from their hot case, which are now cold, and you'd have to heat them back up, those were allowed. Any pre-made subs were allowed. Cakes, donuts, fresh bakery breads, things like that. Those were all previously allowed. All of those are now no longer allowed. And while I can understand the thinking behind at least some of it, maybe the hot meals, etc., and the pre-made subs, because, well, you could get the ingredients and make more yourself doing it that way, although you don't have the convenience. This is a deal where the administration is trying to say they know best what you should eat or how you should spend your money, but it goes beyond that. Okay, you start taking out bakery breads, previously made cakes, cupcakes, donuts, all of those sweet treats, cookies, all of that. Not allowed. Okay. Again, I can kind of understand it, but then you look at the rest of the list, and flour, sugar, baking soda, baking powder, baking chips, marshmallows, all not going to be allowed. So not only are you not allowed to get bakery fresh breads, cakes, cookies, other treats, you are not allowed to get the ingredients to go make it yourself. So they're just saying, well, you can't have anything unhealthy. Then you turn around and you look at some of the rest of the list: no sugar, no tea, no bottled water, no soda, nothing that's not 100% pure juice. And a lot of the juices you buy are not 100% juice. They are a percentage juice and water. They're a blend, or they're not 100% of the same. Maybe even if they are 100% juice, um, there's a lot of the flavored juices and stuff where they are not uh, all one juice, and I don't know how those are going to apply if it must be purely the one juice that you're getting. For example, a lot of times they mix it with apple juice, and it's not a pure 100% whatever juice you're trying to get because it would be way too expensive. Um, all of those things are changing. There are certain things you can't get now. You can't get gravy packets to make your own gravies. You can't get seasonings to season your food. Certain meats and cheeses and things like that are going to also not be allowed. And this is all Republicans trying to say, well, we know how you should spend your food stamp money. That's part of it. They also want people to suffer who are on food stamps and have them eat lower quality meals. And this has been going on since the 80s and probably even before, where they have convinced a segment of this country that all of the problems in this country are due to um, people on welfare or on food assistance programs, things like that, and that they're able to eat better than the average person. And that's just not true. But now they're limiting all sorts of things. And I've even seen videos from right wing creators. This was back during the shutdown when it looked like people weren't going to be getting their food stamp money, talking about how they couldn't wait for groceries to go down now that people weren't getting their food stamps. And of course, that's just not true. We see things about right wing creators saying that that their grocery prices are going to go down, like I said, and it's not true, right? Uh, some of them actually believe that a food stamp card is like a 100% discount card, where you go in and you just fill up your cart full of whatever you want, and you just flash them the card, and the grocery store lets you walk out with everything at 100% free. And that's not the case. It is a budget. And now, I haven't looked into it in the last several years, but the last time I looked into it, it comes up to something like $6, $7 a person a day, something like that, which isn't an overly large amount of money per, that's a couple dollars a meal. And if you budget and you buy the right things, sure, you can make it stretch. Um, and if they are getting certain things like cakes or cookies or whatever, you know it's because they are getting something lesser quality somewhere else, or they're really watching their sales and their budget, um, and getting things and trying to stretch in other departments to cover that difference. Now, food stamps was never meant to be a full coverage of your grocery bill. It was supposed to offset a major percentage, but it was always considered a supplement. You were supposed to have at least so much money that they assumed you were going to spend yourself. Now, not everybody did that, and I know a lot of people personally who had had food stamps for varying amounts of time, and they were using it as the entirety of their food budget. Um, and if that is where you're at financially, that is where you're at financially, and you should be still allowed to get what you want or you need. But Republicans don't like that. They have been trying to get rid of it pretty much since its inception. Now, we saw, uh, now I wasn't old enough to be around, obviously, but during the Great Depression, we saw the results of people not being able to get food. And we decided as a country that we should at least make sure that people have access, if they need it, to food. But Republicans don't like that idea. And one of the reasons that Republicans, especially here in Iowa, but in general, want to put a lot of these restrictions in place. And if this works in Iowa, they are going to try to get other states to agree to it as well. Now, one of the ways it would not work here is if Republicans get voted out in November, and they lose power here in part because of it being enacted. This is something that would directly affect how people vote coming up. But as I talked about yesterday, one of the things I think why the Republicans are hoping that this works here in Iowa and other places is that they are trying to get food stamps to fail, much like they are trying to do with the Affordable Care Act and the subsidies. They are hoping that they end up having it work out so that fewer people use it, or that not everybody uses their entirety of the food stamps because they can't get the items that they want or need. So, because they can't get uh, a lot of the ingredients, they just don't apply. If they make it difficult to use, um, then fewer people are on food stamps, and then they can say, "Well, see, look at how good of a job we're doing. We've decreased the number of people who need assistance in this state, and we got rid of the waste and the fraud." That's what they're going to claim. They're going to claim that everybody who drops off because they can't get items, on food stamps, or they've made it too difficult or whatever. They're going to claim, well, see, everybody who was off of it was only on it because of waste or fraud, or only because they could get the junk food and they weren't actually getting the food that anything they needed to survive. And this is just about Republicans trying to get their way. Now, obviously, I think here in Iowa, Rob Sand is going to probably be the next Democratic governor. He's got a really good message, and he is currently the only statewide elected Democrat. However, um, one of the things that is going to hurt him if he does become governor after this November's election, or this upcoming November's election, is that while he takes over, he may not be able to get this reversed quickly. And that could be something that hurts the Democrats, because unfortunately, Democrats or liberal leaning people, we have a problem in this country where we want change to come immediately. And if things don't work out as fast as we want them to, we blame the Democrats and we go after them, and then we're just never happy with it, right? It is something that we need to work on, because not only is Rob Sand here in Iowa, if he becomes governor, like I think he will, going to have a lot of things to fix. When Democrats regain control, even if they regain control in 2026, or next year here in the midterms, that um, they're not going to be able to fix everything right away. So just because Democrats win in the midterms doesn't mean everything's going to be just automatically fixed. It's just going to mean if they get the House or the Senate or both, that they are going to be able to limit what the damage Donald Trump can continue to do to this country. And then when they gain power back in 2028, well, then they're going to have to turn around, and it's going to be a process of fixing everything. But my big fear is that if by 2030 things aren't completely fixed and everything back to normal, that the public is going to turn around and go, well, we should go back to Republicans, because clearly Democrats didn't fix it the way they should. Republicans are saying they'll fix it. We got to change something because it's not fixed. It's not the way I want it. And that's what happened to Joe Biden. He comes in, things weren't perfect. In 2026, things weren't better enough, and he lost the House. Imagine what would have happened if Joe Biden had had a Republican or a democratically controlled House of Representatives in the second half of his term, instead of a Republican controlled House of Representatives. He could have gotten much more accomplished. There would have been less fighting, less bullshit, and we may not have had to deal with stupidity like the TikTok ban that Republicans stuck into a must pass foreign aid package. Um, because they went ahead and said, well, if we stick this in there, it's going to be a poison pill and Democrats won't pass it. Both sides played each other and both sides lost. And that's something else Democrats need to do a better job of is messaging on foreign aid. Because coming from a rural farming state like Iowa, I understand how things like foreign aid and USAID and other aid things actually affect the economy. When we give an aid package to a place, say like Ukraine, that is currently, under siege by Russia, and we give them food aid or we give them military assistance, it comes and one of the things that the media does not do a very good job about is they report it as this massive giveaway of money to the foreign country, right? But it's not just money. It is we give them, sure, we spent, I don't know, let's just say $100 billion, but it's all food. Well, that $100 billion is to buy food from American farmers that turns around and gets sent over there. So that stimulates the economy here. Farmers are now making better money, and then they can spend their money in local businesses, etc. Or if it's military assistance, military things, usually it's one of two ways they do that. They typically either A, have gone through our own stockpiles of stuff for the US military and said, hey, we've got a bunch of stuff we need to replace. Let's send them the stuff we need to replace and we will buy new. Okay, that is one option. And then they go purchase the new items as part of this spending package. And they had put a dollar value on what they were giving away and said, okay, well, we're going to buy that many dollars worth of new products for our military and resupply them. Or they go out and they buy new from the manufacturers here in the United States. Either way, those both create jobs here as there are orders being placed with manufacturers in the United States, which is putting people to work on factory floors, assembling those items. And then they turn around and that stimulates the economy because those workers now have more money on their paycheck, whether that involves them working overtime or in some cases just getting a job if they need extra help, etc. It all stimulates the economy, but the Republican voters specifically, but Republican politicians and even the media don't do a good enough job of uh, explaining it. The politicians don't. They want you to believe that, oh, well, we just cut Ukraine a blank check and they can go spend that money on whatever they want, for example. And that's not true. But then the other thing we hear when it comes to foreign aid is always, well, we should spend more money here at home. But then when it comes time to do things at home, for example, like the food stamp program and making sure people have food, you hear about things about like what Iowa is trying to do that I opened the show with, talking about cutting away how people can actually spend the money and making it so there's nothing they can do and that they can't actually use that money. It's just ridiculous. Um, the Republicans, they say things both ways and hope you pay attention, or that you're not paying attention, I should say, and that you go, oh yeah, well we don't want to help these people over here, but if we also don't help those people over there, we can use the money from the first program to help the second people, but then they tell us we don't need to help the second people either. It's ridiculous. It is just them trying to uh, confuse everybody and spin the narrative so nobody gets any assistance anywhere in the world. All right. So last night we had a special election here in Iowa. Okay. And it was Renee Hardman was the Democrat. She won her seat in the Iowa Senate. Now, I have not heard what the percentage that Donald Trump had, if he had won or who won that particular district in 2024. So I do not know how well she overperformed, but I heard she got like 78% of the vote. Now, That is impressive. This doesn't change much here in Iowa. This just prevents, again, Republicans from having a supermajority in the state house. I mean, it doesn't change. It doesn't make it so Democrats have control or anything like that, but it does prevent a supermajority. So Kim Reynolds, in the last year of her governorship, is going to end up um, having problems. Okay, she's going to end up um, not being able to uh, get things through that she would want to do. She's going to have to get at least some Democratic support in both chambers, not so much in the House, but they don't have a supermajority there either. And she's going to need help from at least one Democratic senator to pass anything through the Iowa Senate, which is a good thing. They are going to be limiting what can happen here. And the Iowa Senate works kind of like the federal Senate, where there's a filibuster and things like that. So they can block some things. So congratulations to uh, Renee Hardman for winning her special election. And this continues the trend of Democrats performing very, very well in elections this year against Republicans. Republicans should be worried that going into the midterms coming up in just uh, over 10 full months, that they are going to be having a very rough time of it. And I think they may be. I think they might be worried. Now, hopefully, this continues the trend of pushing back against Republicans all the way around. Um, now, uh, we've been talking about issues here, and I've got some notes here that I'm checking. So, we've been talking about Donald Trump and his hands, and he has been having a lot of bruising on both of his hands now. The bruising is getting worse. Um, and I do not buy the story, the official story coming out of the White House and other Republicans this is a story they have been trying to use for literally months, basically since Donald Trump retook the White House, that the bruising has been because of vigorous handshaking. Well, problem with that is now that it is spread to his left hand, he doesn't use his left hand to shake hands, not really. So there wouldn't be a grip problem, things like that, where it is bruising up. Um, and that is a problem. But they're going to keep spinning this narrative as long as people seem to believe it. They don't want us asking the tough questions. They don't want us looking deeper into what is going on. They just want us compliant. They want us to agree that whatever's going on is the problem, blah, blah, blah. You know, that, yeah, it's that there's nothing seriously wrong with Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump doesn't want his health talked about. He wants us to believe that he is in perfect health, that there is absolutely nothing wrong with him. And that's just arguably false. We can see that there is stuff wrong with Donald Trump. And a lot of people were hoping that he wasn't going to make it to the end of the year, that he was going to be gone before then. I still do not think that he will make it to the end of his term. At the rate he is going with the stress of everything, and as things continue to pile up and mount on and add more pressure to Donald Trump, it is going to get worse and worse for him, and he is not going to be able to maintain the schedule that he is trying to do. And it's already bad enough. He's not out doing the things he used to do. We see him go to his golf courses, but we don't see nearly the images anymore of him golfing. Um, we see him taking a lot more of a relaxed schedule. Um, they do try to do events here and there where he's up for long periods of time, but we're already hearing from the White House, and I've talked about it before, that he doesn't start his day till like 10:30, 11 o'clock in the morning, that he is no longer an early riser. He's not up and at 'em, that's in part because he sleeps late in the morning because he is up all night because he's sundowning and he's resharing a bunch of stuff here and there. Um, and he doesn't want us talking about his health. But it's going to get worse and worse. And this is going to be one of the things that drives Donald Trump nuts because he is all about his image and how he appears. And people saying that he's unfit, he's unhealthy, etc., is going to drive Donald Trump insane. Now, tonight, um, uh, Zohan Mamdani is going to be sworn in as mayor of New York City. And I'll probably talk a little bit more about it, see what happens with it tomorrow, if anything major happens. But Donald Trump had been trying to prevent that from exact thing from happening. Republicans were trying to do anything. They were trying to sue. They were trying to pressure the FBI to go after him for visa violation or immigration reform or not immigration reform, deport him for cause or whatever. And nothing happened. He's going to be the mayor of New York City. Now, we will see if any of his projects actually come to pass. And if they do, what kind of response um, the city has and how well it works. But the big thing is, with him being sworn in, this should be assigned to Democrats. And as much as I hate on Republicans because they are the major threat right now, we can't sit back on our heels and think Democrats are perfect all of the time because they are not. They have their own set of problems. Now, we need to go focus on the Democrats, go after them, and say, look at what happened in New York City. We elected Mamdani. We need to go toward the left a little more. See, I think one of the big takeaways from the 2024 election is they are going to go, even though they lost the election on the, all the way around, that they are going to say, well, we need to shift farther to the right because that's the way the country wants to be. And they're going to go closer and closer to the center, when in reality, they should be shifting farther left. Because one of the things that you heard in backlash was that Kamala Harris was not left enough. Same problem that happened in 2020 or in 2016 with Hillary Clinton is that she was not left enough for certain people, and they wanted somebody more progressive, somebody like Bernie Sanders. So we have to deal with that. We were going to see what happens with Mamdani becoming the mayor of New York and how that changes everything. And this is going to probably drive Donald Trump crazy. Now, he had met with Mamdani earlier this year, and they had a great meeting. And of course, he had nothing but praise to heap on the guy after running a very aggressive campaign against him, talking about how bad it was going to be if he got elected and all of this. But once he talked to him, suddenly they were best friends. And I think Donald Trump was just impressed by his rise to power, and he wanted to see if he could mooch off of some of that success himself and make things better for himself. All right. Now, U.S. Treasurer Brandon Beach is talking about wanting to design for the 250th anniversary of the United States and going forward a bill, a $250 bill that would have Donald Trump's face on it. And he wants it to be legal tender. Now, he even admitted in the article I read that they can't just do this, but he's really trying to push Congress to make it happen. And he says that they're already working on designs, things like that. So if they do approve it, it would be quickly done and they could get it out into circulation. Now, I do not expect this to happen. First of all, there are two federal laws that prohibit this exact thing from happening. There's a law from the 1960s, and I think even something from before that, that straight up says you cannot have anybody on U.S. currency who is alive. That is one of the rules. So Now they are trying to put Donald Trump's image on the 250th um, coin, the dollar commemorative coin for the 250th celebration. And if they do, that would be actual legal tender. But again, even if they do it, they may do it around Congress and just by the time they're done saying, "Well, try to stop us." But there, but the other part or the other law that I was referencing when it comes to this $250 bill was one from the 70s and the Nixon administration, where they limited what could be or what size of bill it could be, and that is it had to be only $100 bill or less, nothing larger. We used to have $500 bills, $1,000 bills, $10,000 bills, um, and those are no longer uh, made. I believe if you have one, technically they could be used as legal currency still because they were at the time. Um, but they have way more value as a collector item than they do as actual currency. But why did we switch? Well, we switched over from having those large bills to having only $100 bills or less because of the war on drugs was a big chunk of it, and money laundering and things like that. Because now, if you are taking $1 million across, um, you know, the country, if you're taking it across the country, across state lines, on an airplane, maybe even internationally, well, $1 million in $100 bills, what would that be? 1,000 $100 bills? That's a lot. That's going to take up a lot of space. Now, we had bills up to, I believe, $100,000 note at one point. Now, they weren't very common. Most of the time, they were just used between banks and other major institutions. Um, Back and forth, but they would occasionally get out. If you had somebody who had that kind of money, they could get those big bills. Um, and then they would say, if you wanted to take $1 million out of the country, well, you'd only need 10 $100,000 notes or even 100 $10,000 notes. And those are very, you could make that fit into a wallet or something like that. It's a lot easier to conceal. Whereas now, with it being limited at $100, um, moving large amounts of money is more of a challenge. Now, I don't know if Congress is actually going to pass anything um, to do this. This is just more kissing up to Donald Trump. See, boss, I'm trying to get your image on a bill. I'm trying to make it happen for you because we know you won't have your face everywhere, your image everywhere. That's how he is, right? He's all about being everywhere and being named on everything. In this, the for whatever reason, the people around him are sucking up to him in part to keep their job. And I don't even know how much of it is that they actually believe the things they are doing there. They're just trying to push for, things like this to keep Donald Trump in a good mood. If they came up to him and said, "Hey, Donald, there's no way we could actually put your image on a bill. We're not even going to talk about it in the media until Congress acts." He'd be upset or whatever. They can come out and say this. Well, we're going to work with Congress, and if they pass it, we can do it. Now, normally I would say, whatever, it's not going to happen, which is basically what I said. But the simple fact that we have this big event coming up, the 250th celebration, I figured it was worth a little bit of discussing on it, about what they're doing, their reasonings behind it, etc. But either way, it doesn't matter because it's not actually going to happen. Now, Fox News came out with a segment yesterday, I believe. And, what are they focused on? Who are they talking about? Well, this program was on Hannity, and they were asking, can you believe where Joe Biden is? That's right, Joe Biden's on vacation. Wait a minute. Why does it matter where Joe Biden is? Joe Biden is not president right now. Their boy, Donald Trump, is. They won. In fact, even if their person had lost, would it have mattered where Joe Biden is at this point? No. Because Kamala Harris would have been president. Joe Biden resigned from the race. He dropped out of the race back in July of 24. He's not president right now. He hasn't been president for almost a full year at this point. And we're going into the end of the year, to the end of Donald Trump's first full year as president, and they're still worried about where Joe Biden is, what Joe Biden is doing. This whole thing, if you haven't seen the clip, it is ridiculous. It's only a few seconds long, but they're trying to make a big deal out of Biden being on vacation. The dude's retired. They talk about Donald Trump living in our heads rent free because I do what I do and other people talk about Joe Biden or talking about Donald Trump all the time in what is currently going on because he's president. We talk about the things that had happened during the Biden administration where Donald Trump had made headlines by doing this or by doing that, etc. And but it was because he kept staying in the headlines. Joe Biden himself has pretty much stayed out of the headlines for the entirety of their term or of this term so far. He isn't doing anything. He is, just out enjoying life, enjoying not being the president of the United States right now. And that's fine. It's great. I'm glad he's able to go out and do whatever he wants to do at this point. He should get that opportunity. But Republicans are now focused back on Joe Biden and trying to blame things on Biden because they don't want to have any blame land on Donald Trump for the state of how things are right now. Donald Trump, he even said it early when he was interviewed early into this term. They said, "Well, when does it become the Trump economy?" He goes, "Well, the good things are the Trump economy, the bad things are the Biden economy." And he's trying to maintain that. Now, Fox News is trying to say, well, that Joe Biden should be somewhere doing something about how bad things are right now. Why? He's not president. He's got no authority. He has every bit of the same authority that Donald Trump had 4 years ago sitting in Mar-a-Lago. None. But this is where Republicans are. This is where Fox News is they're trying to keep Joe Biden's name in the media, and they're trying to by asking things like, "Where is Biden?" or "Oh man, he's out on vacation." They're trying to keep their base riled up against Biden, so they don't blame Donald Trump for anything that's going on, because they have to protect Trump because there's no one else to blame at this point. Republicans have complete control of the House, the Senate, the Supreme Court, and the presidency, and nothing's stopping them at this point. Now, you may have heard about this story out of Minnesota on these daycares, and of course, they're going after the Somali community in uh, Minnesota about these Somali-run daycares that aren't actually even supposedly not even open, and that they couldn't verify are actually being daycares, but they're getting state money. Well, more information is coming out about this, and I haven't really talked about it much, but more information's coming out, and that it is some of the locations that they were going during outside of business hours. Okay, they don't open till 2 p.m. And the guy, this right wing influencer, whose name I can't even think of right now, don't care because he's just somebody who got viral for doing this story, um, shows up at like noon. They're not even open. And I don't know the exact time frame, but he showed up ahead of their time that they would even be open to the public and say, well, why aren't you open? Why? Well, see, there's no kids here. They're clearly just wasting taxpayer money, but they're not open. That'd be like going to your local grocery store. We got one in town here that closes at 9 p.m. every weeknight. If I show up at 2 in the morning going, I want food, why isn't anybody here to help me? People would look at me like I'm an idiot. Same thing. But this guy gained some traction for exposing fraud, in his words. There was no fraud. The fraud is this guy being unserious. But this administration does what it always does, and it takes something that is not true, blows it up, makes it a big story, and now we are finding out that the Department of Health and Human Services, which oversees things like this, they are going to be freezing all daycare subsidies sent out to all 50 states because of this news story. And that now they are going to be asking for all sorts of proof that the money they are sending out isn't being wasted when it comes to daycare assistance. So they want them to go through and to justify all things when it comes to this daycare assistance. They want documentation. They want to prove uh, competency in staff. They want to prove that it's not any sort of fraud, and that they want receipts that they're actually paying for the appropriate number of kids and all of this. And this is another case of where they are blowing up something that is not a news story. Because, like I said, these daycares that were being operated, this guy shows up outside their normal operating hours and says, well, nobody's here. It was a non story. But they make it a big deal. Now they're trying to say that it is, this big story, and we've uncovered this big amount of fraud and abuse. And they want states to prove proper use of it. This is 4/10 of 1% of the federal budget is spent on daycare and Head Start programs. Yeah, it sounds like a lot of money when you're talking about $20 to $24 billion nationally. However, it is only that big. That's not that big when you're talking about, we got what, almost $7 trillion yearly is our federal budget. Come on, it's really not that big of a story. And the other thing about this whole story that a lot of people aren't talking about is this podcaster, this right wing influencer, shows up at these places, outside their normal operating hours when they don't have kids there yet, first of all, and tries to make a big story about it. Then he does apparently go there a couple times when they're open, and he wants to make it a big story and go in and he wants to prove it's all kind of fraud. And he shows up with people. He's got no credentials. He's not a state inspector. He's not anybody but a private citizen. And he shows up with a bunch of people in masks and says, I want access to your facility. And they tell him no. They tell him to go fuck himself. Well, that's what they should do. If you have a daycare facility that just lets anybody into the building and to look around where these kids are that are under their care and under their protection, I would actually be more concerned if he got access. But again, this is what happens with right-wing creators and right-wing personalities, et cetera, is they take something that's a non-story, they blow it up into bigger proportion than it really is, and now they think they've uncovered this big thing. The biggest problem with it is if this whole thing, they were targeting the Somali community. And it's because it's the Somali community is the whole reason they're up in arms. If it wasn't about race, they probably wouldn't care, right? They would understand. But this is Republicans lacking critical thinking skills and not being able to deduce everything that is going on there. All right. Now, Donald Trump has been making comments about his ballroom. Now, this ballroom that has yet to be built, um, and I don't know if it ever actually gets fully completed. I don't know if he lives to see it done. And hopefully they turn around and they get rid of it. They bring back the East Wing. Donald Trump decided to tear into it. He had been talking about building this ballroom, and it wasn't even going to touch the existing building, and it was going to do this and it was going to do that. And then he decides to tear it down and to build it over where the East Wing used to be in response to the No Kings protest when, 7 to 10 million, maybe even more Americans were out all over the country in every major city and a lot of small communities out holding protests telling that this would be king, this uh, orange dipshit, that we hate him and that he can go fuck himself. So he tears down the East Wing and he wants to build this ballroom. Well, it was originally going to be $200 million ballroom. Now that price tag has ballooned to $400 million, and things don't make sense with this ballroom. They're talking about it being 90,000 square feet and it's only going to hold 1,000 people. Now I know there's going to be certain things and certain there's going to be backroom staff and room for kitchen and all that. But there was a ballroom in the East Wing that was already there that already held 250 people. So he said he needed a bigger space, but he's only going to get up to 4 times as many people in the new space, and he got rid of everything in the East Wing. But anyway, he's been talking about this ballroom. Now he says it's going to be up to 400 million, maybe even more. But he could do it for so much less. But he could do it for less because he's a master builder and he knows about all the things with building buildings because he was in the real estate game for so long. And he goes ahead and now he says it's going to be even higher. It's going to be up to $400 million, but it's going to have bulletproof glass in the windows and it's going to have anti-drone technology. What does he mean, anti-drone technology? Is he going to put, missile turrets, anti-missile equipment on the roof? What does he mean, anti-drone technology? Or is he just saying things that he thinks is going to sound impressive and that he's going to get people on board? We didn't need it before. He didn't need those kind of things before. But he even talked about putting rocket launchers on the roof of the White House so he could launch missiles from the Oval Office. He's very clearly not well. He's not in the right headspace. His priorities are all misaligned. And he thinks people are actually going to care about this. Like I said, I don't even know if this ballroom ever gets done. Now, there are lawsuits going about whether or not Donald Trump even has the authority to tear down the East Wing and to build it. Yes, I know other presidents have done major remodels, but they never gutted and tore down existing facility. Now, yes, Harry Truman famously gut a lot of the inside of the White House, but he did that with approval from Congress as they had to redo a bunch of the structure to make it safe. This isn't doing the same thing, but again, Republicans are going to latch onto it and call it the same thing, just like what they are trying to do, and they've tried to do since the beginning of Donald Trump doing all of these upgrade projects to the White House, and saying, "Well, where was the energy, the same energy when Obama spent hundreds of millions of dollars building a basketball court?" Well, he didn't. Hundreds of millions of dollars on a basketball court would have been the size of an arena with major seating and all sorts of things like that. What Obama did, because he liked basketball, is he put in a couple of hoops on both sides of a tennis court and he painted some lines to make it a multi-purpose space. This is the same thing your local high school might do if they are worried about space and cost saving measures and things like that. I mean, why is this a big deal? It wasn't, but they're trying to find a way to compare the two, that they're trying to find a way to connect the dots to show that Barack Obama was every bit as bad as Donald Trump when it comes to everything going on. And it's not, it's a false equivalency. But see, there's a certain group of people in this country that are going to hear Obama spent 200 million on a basketball court, and they're going to believe it without ever looking into it deeper, without ever hearing the rest of it or even thinking critically about it, about how what, a $200 million basketball court potentially could look like. They're just going to say, "Yeah, that sounds right," and go on. It's weird. And this is again Republican pundits and uh, lawmakers knowing what their base is going to believe and playing up to those exact kind of things. Now, one of the other things Donald Trump has been talking about, he shared something on social media about windmills. Now, he has been against wind turbines his entire presidency. He's been trying to convince us that they are harmful, and they're not. But he has been trying to convince us that they're harmful. We need to get rid of them and go back to things like coal and things like that. And they're trying to um, move away from the technology and the increase in things that are going on. Well, he shared something that he thought was going to rile up a group of people in this country. And of course, he'd be right. They always talk about how patriotic MAGA is and the right is. Well, this image is of what he is claiming is a dead bald eagle, and that it is because of a wind turbine. However, there's multiple problems with that. One, the image is not actually a bald eagle, it's a falcon. Two, it wasn't even taken from the United States. It was an image from Israel. There's Hebrew writing on the turbine. And Donald Trump playing it up. See the wind turbines, the windmills they're killing our bald eagles. We need to stop, this dangerous thing. His big problem with them, it isn't about the fact that they are producing energy or whatever. He one, he knows there's at least a section of this country that doesn't want to see the coal mining jobs, et cetera, go away because it is a big part of their community. And to some extent, I get where he is coming from on that part of it. Um, but then there's the rest of it where uh, his big thing is he just doesn't like the look. He doesn't like, looking out look in any sort of a view and seeing wind turbines in his frame of view. He thinks they're ugly and he doesn't like the aesthetic, that they ruin the scenery. Simple fact of the matter is wind turbines are a big hit. They have reduced our energy costs by a lot. And here in Iowa, there is a community that they took a manufacturer had left, and a wind turbine place bought their manufacturing building and has turned it into a thriving business where they are producing. Uh, I think it is just the blades, but I could be wrong. That they're producing parts for the turbines, and there are tons of jobs being created. It has kept that community going when the main industry in the town had left. The wind turbines come back and they produce jobs and they made it so um people how were able to be employed, and that again, as I talked about earlier, generating income, and it was an economic multiplier. But Donald Trump doesn't care. He doesn't care about any of that. He just thinks they're aesthetically bad. He's been doing everything in his power to um go away from it. Now, ultimately, what is going to happen when Donald Trump is gone and the Republicans are out of power again is all of his changes, we're going to go right back. We're going to push right back, going probably even harder into wind and solar and other types of power generation. And the green energy push is coming. It is going to continue. It is a simple fact, but Donald Trump and certain Republicans don't care about that. They're trying to control it to make it so that it doesn't happen, at least not yet. They're trying to delay things. They want to say, well, we didn't need it back then. Well, maybe we didn't need it, but we should have been looking into it for a long time. I remember being in high school, not even high school, grade school, And I did a science fair project on wind generation and power generation. Um, and we found, and I was able to prove that you could create electricity through it. They were talking then in the 80s and early 90s about how wind power was going to be the future. And we're going to continue pressing forward toward that future, um, because that's the only way forward. Fossil fuels aren't going to be around forever. We're not going to be able to continue to burn coal forever, etc. We're going to have to do something else. And looking at other alternative ways to generate power is a good thing. It's a way of um, driving the economy. And for those people that are worried about like coal jobs going away, well, those kind of things have always happened, right? You know, we don't have switchboard operators anymore when it comes to telephones. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, um, if you don't remember watching old programs or things like that, it used to be you never direct dialed anybody's number. You would call the operator and you would say, Operator, I ring this community and this number. And they would physically plug in your line to that line, and they would connect you, or they would connect you from one town to the next town, and then you'd have to talk to the operator in that town, and then they would connect your number. It was a whole thing. But they found a way to do direct dial. They got rid of those jobs. We're always moving forward and finding other avenues, other ways of doing things. So if the coal jobs go away, they're not going to completely go away overnight. But as we get rid of coal dependency and things like that, we're going to have to find other industry, like I talked about with the community here in Iowa, where major manufacturer left, it got turned into manufacturing plant, paying just as well, if not better, and they're producing wind turbine stuff. And it kept the community alive. That's what we've always done in this country, and we're going to continue to do. But people like Donald Trump are so terrified of the future and terrified of progress that they're doing anything and everything in their power to back away from it and to try to prevent it from happening. All right, that's going to do it for the Analytical Iowan podcast for today, for New Year's Eve. I hope anybody who is out celebrating has a great night. Like I said in the open, I hope you are safe doing whatever it is you are doing to celebrate. Hope you have a great day, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.
That was Eric. That does it for our analysis today. If you appreciated us cutting through the noise to get to the critical context, please make sure you're subscribed to the Analytical Iowan podcast on Spotify and YouTube. We'll be back tomorrow. Thanks for listening.